had a lot of information presented to us. Tonight we're going to want to start getting into those details. We want to use a grading matrix that allows you guys to work in small groups but have similar conversations. We want to not look at projects at the surface, but give you a grading matrix that structures it around a conversation around particular factors that you want to consider when rating and grading a project on its priority level. So, again, guide valuable discussion, weigh pros and cons before we decide an overarching priority of a project. So these are the 4 factors that we have come up with that we want you all to use when grading the project this evening. So I'll talk about each one to give us some context of what we mean by these. So urgency of need, that should be pretty self-explanatory, but how dire is this project based on the needs we have today? Does it address a current condition that is disruptive to learning or safety or security concerns, draining resources, addressing overcrowding, these types of things that are really urgent to take care of. Benefit to students. Hopefully everything we're doing tonight or discussing touches the students in some way, obviously, but there's going to be different levels of benefit to students when we look at those projects. So do they provide new opportunities? Do they aid in advancing learning experiences? How many students does it impact? Some projects may have a bigger impact to students than another project. We want you to talk about those things and weigh those pros and cons. Equity. We've talked a lot about equity, and I see you guys taking notes. I do have a handout with all of this for you when you get to that piece. But we're just talking about what they mean for now. Obviously, equity, we've talked a lot about with the middle school and things of that nature, but does the project aid in providing an equitable learning environment for your students across grade levels or programs? But also think about what students are experiencing outside this community. Are you providing an equitable learning experience to what somebody would receive in a neighboring district? And lastly, value. So you may define value in different ways. I will tell you we are not talking about dollars and cents tonight. We want you to go through this first process, really thinking about the project itself and the impact it will have versus is it fit in the budget. So that will come in the next step. When we're talking about value, we mean what's the kind of return on investment when it comes to the use you're going to get out of that facility. Is there future flexibility? Is it going to help aid in reducing operational costs for you, and those types of things? Also, is it something the community would find value in? You feel like it's something that aligns with your community values and goals? So those 4 factors may not all be equal to you, right? If something is urgent, should that be more important than how it impacts students? So what we want to do is actually apply a weight to each factor. So we, to make it easy, have defined the percentages of the factor, of the weight that each factor will hold. So the first, number 1, your most important factor, will make up 40% of that project rating total. The second, 30%, the third, 20%, and the fourth, 10%. Does that make sense? So when you don't need to worry about if you choose benefit to students is more important than value, you don't have to think about that when you're rating them for each factor. You can just, the weight will already be applied based on the fact that you said that that's more important. So the first part of tonight's activity is to talk about these as a table and to rank these 4 factors. It should be pretty simple. We want you to have discussion and agree on that before we get into the projects themselves. So
there was the option. Somebody did have written that out, but it just didn't receive any votes. And one said expand current elementary schools, 0 votes. I think 6 and 7 really kind of say the same thing, almost. No, you're right, that's right. Expand current elementary schools just as a whole and keeping them at K-5. So middle school options, new middle school received 28 votes, by far the most. Lakeside Middle School renovate and expand received 1 vote. And then a different option to look at was Lakeside Middle School creating a fine arts addition received 1 vote. So that was all of the different categories. I just listed everything that we had talked about. You may have written it in a different fashion, but everything that you listed is up here with the votes. Yes, Tom?
We were just having a little sidebar, and apologize for us talking while you were talking, but
Sorry.
on the middle school options, on the new middle school, 28 votes, and then number 2 would be Lakeside Middle School, renovate and expand. Can you tell us how you categorized that out? Was it, okay, if there was a dot beside a new middle school, then everybody that voted for that was fine.
Yes.
But were they also saying, okay, if we build the new middle school, that we want to then tie that bill to a Lakeside Middle School renovate and expansion? Or was a vote for number 2 not a vote for a new middle school? You understand what I'm saying? We thought we were. Because we thought, our impression at our table was, if we did a new middle, that the Lakeside renovation would be tied to it. It doesn't appear that that's the case, but it could just be a miss.
No, that's a good point.
So
So
don't worry
what?
about
She said she would talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, let him go to his.
That's good.
But hold on, doesn't that matter though for people's equity? Because now we're saying when people voted last week, if that's part of the discussions, and now equity is not important, what if people want to change their table?
So Mike's literally about to say that the 2 are tied together.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, they really are, and we're looking at it that way. I mean, it just so happened that that's how it was written. I didn't change how it was written on the Post-it notes that were put up. But yes, everything we've discussed with administration is, if we build a new middle school, we have to bring Lakeside up as renovation. Now, the difference being the number of students we put at Lakeside. And if we try to not only renovate and expand, or just renovate. Because the key to it, one of the things that will make a difference is this right here. If we take Powell out of the equation, we're cutting out about 300 to 400 students off of that campus essentially. That leaves about 800 to 850 at Lakeside. And I think that's why I said this one was a little bit different. But yes, everything we've discussed with the administration, and in here too, I believe, everybody's consensus was, yes, if we build new middle school, we have to do something at Lakeside. We're not going to leave it alone. It has a lot of issues. You know, facility.
Right.
What are you gonna do with the
Okay, so our potential projects. Now, just what I talked about. I forgot this was the next slide. So, separate from the prioritization exercise, since we had such a high vote count on new middle school for 1,200 students, we're going to say that is a given. We're not going to go through the prioritization exercise. I mean, it was clear, it was a majority in the room. Felt like that was something we just can move on. And if that's done, then Lakeside Middle School renovations, we must do that for everyone. So we are looking at, these are the types of things at Lakeside to replace some metal buildings. We need to improve the circulation in that building, renovate the existing school. When we start adding on, when we start doing additions, there is a possibility that the city at that particular time will have enacted the new building code, or the 2015 building code, that says any addition over 50 students that will accommodate 50 students has to have a shelter associated with it. So we have to factor that into the overall cost if we do additions. And then also, we're looking at athletic improvements that were discussed by the athletic director at that previous meeting last week, if you recall, some of the things, the track needs improving, and some of those other things. So we are looking at those. So, and we want to take off the deficiency items, the existing deficiency items off of your prioritization list. And the reason we do that is, I don't know how to say this. The school district knows what the priorities are for those projects. They're going to fit those things in that are the highest priority and let you know what those are. You sitting here, I don't know it. Who needs a new roof? Who needs it worse? The air conditioners on a particular school, what needs to be done? You know, those sorts of things are what we're talking about. And we feel like we're going to rely on the expert Rod's team in facilities to go through that list and prioritize those things. We will assist in cost estimating those for him, and we will fold all of that in together, your prioritizations, theirs, costs, and see that whole package next time. So we want you to focus on the other projects, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So here are the potential projects for prioritization. For elementary growth, we want you to talk about converting Powell to K-5 and converting Prestwick to K-5. All of those factors that we just talked about, we want you to look at those two. The career tech and STEM focus, we want you to look at the elementary STEM renovations. We're talking about converting an existing library and or a classroom on every elementary campus for a STEM focus. It could be, I don't know how it will look yet. It could take the form of some maker space or something like that for students to come in and do special project-based projects, PBL kind of things. Or it may be a classroom, whatever that campus determines they need as a STEM focus, that's what we're talking about. Little Elm High School existing career tech renovations and expansions. Now the list was long that you gave us. It was already pared down by administration. We felt like, or the administration felt like some of the things may need to just come later. Some of the big ticket items like an auto tech lab or some large addition kind of things needed to be taken off the table. But things that could be accomplished within the existing building, like an engineering lab renovation, a health science lab renovation, or some additional equipment that Tony, you talked about to the group, could be accomplished. And a welding lab and a school store. Now, the welding lab would also be expansion within the walls of the high school. So that's the kinds of things that we were talking about for that. We did look and want you to talk also separately about a new horticulture program space. This would incorporate a larger greenhouse or a large greenhouse, a lab, and some storage space for that program. So we wanted you to look at those. Any questions about that? Yes?
Horticulture, is that high school, middle school?
High school. High school as well, yes. So items 4 and 5, both at the high school. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the elementary school,
Yes.
specifically, there was 2 options, but they aren't interchangeable. You can't, like, even if we converted Prestwick, we would still have to
Yes.
do something. So how do
Yes.
we tear those apart and vote prioritization when they're both based on
On
program
the numbers,
capacity?
yeah.
Well, based on program capacity, we have to do both, or out of the
Yeah,
option.
I think we just wanted to see where they wound up in the whole scheme of things of the priority of the group here. So yes, I think we're gonna have to do both in order to get the numbers up to meet the demographics that we have talked
Yeah,
about.
okay.
So, but we wanted to break them out, we didn't want to
Kind
put
of
them together.
interchangeable, like the new middle school slab?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
essentially they are, because if you look at it, round figure numbers, in 10 years, you need a new elementary school of about 750. And this seemed to be the consensus of getting the two most votes from the group, that if we converted Powell, we can gain about 400 students. If we converted Prestwick, we can gain about 350 students in the elementary grade level. So that total equals a new elementary school. Instead of having to build a new elementary, then we can gain this by renovations and save a lot of money. So that's kind of where I think the.
So are additions to elementary schools not an option? Repeat that question, please.
Are additions,
Additions to elementary schools not an option?
Wasn't that in the voting?
it was in the voting. It was in the voting. It was very low on the list. As I said, if you do Powell and Prestwick, you don't really need additions.
But what if somebody doesn't want Prestwick to go to a K through 5, and after looking at this, they say, okay, maybe we don't like that because we're not taking a holistic approach like we thought we were last time. It's hard to use the matrix.
If you didn't do Prestwick as a K-5, that's true. You would have to do additions at another elementary campus or two, probably, to get that.
And so I don't understand why that's being taken off the table.
Can we add it to the list?
But when I voted for Prestwick turning K through 5 and adding STEM with additions to all the other schools. And what they were saying, or my understanding was, is that we could do both when we voted last time, and now it was taken off the table. So I feel like my vote was no longer weighted.
Well, we've talked about adding STEM programs at the elementary schools, but not adding numbers to those elementary schools, not increasing.
You're not adding any square footage to
Right.
those elements.
That is purely a renovation, so we're not adding
We're providing,
total students.
providing space for STEM in our current
Right.
configuration. So making STEM opportunities.
Go back to your slide that has the vote, because that's what we need. So expanding the elementaries there with one vote.
Not really.
Not really, I mean, it was,
That's number 7.
yeah.
Number 7 is what. Yes. It has to have a caveat.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with number 3, Old Point had 4 votes. Everyone knows in our industry how quickly Old Point's gonna be overcrowded. And so that was the reason why many of them asked to add a wing to Old Point. But
Right.
if you end up doing where you are converting Powell to an elementary and Prestwick to an elementary, you'll just have to rezone the Old Point.
That's true, yes.
You don't need the rest.
And the administration understands the consequences of that would be, well, instead of right down this street, we're all going to Oak Point now,
Right.
it's over here.
Right.
And
They just
and
have to
it just
rezone.
gets- they'll remove it.
So you wouldn't expand Lakeside then to be larger, it would be a small middle school, and you wouldn't expand Powell to be a larger elementary school.
Right.
It would only be 400.
That's the thought process now, right? So the question was, so you wouldn't expand Lakeside to be a larger middle school, it would stay smaller. For the numbers that you're showing right now, you're gonna need 2,000 middle school students, 6 through 8, in 10 years. So the thought process was if we had a 1,200 student middle school and 800 students at Lakeside, there's 2,000 students, so we get our students. Now, what we can do at Lakeside, because you will continue to grow past 10 years, is in the design, make sure that we are providing the space for a future expansion to move that school up to 1,200 as well. So beyond that, we don't like to look past 10 years because the demographics will change. That's possible. So, you know, Bob Templeton was saying, for sure, look out 5 years, 10 years, a little more fuzzy, right? Even further out, even more fuzzy, but we know you'll continue to grow. But after that, I think the thought process was, then we're gonna go to a third middle school at some point in time, as you continue to grow, and you know, that's where then you'll finally be built
So
out.
the middle school was getting that, well,
Yes,
it's desegregated.
right, right. And keeping those at a 1,200 case, and still 6 through 8, so about 400 per grade is the thought. And your second part of your question?
Well, just Powell would be very
Oh, Powell would
small,
stay 400.
because all of our other elementary schools.
Are 600, right.
And our
Powell,
students, so.
So Powell has the opportunity to grow if it needs to. There's room on that campus. We don't see the need to do an addition right now, but it could grow in the future. And the caveat there again is why we don't want to do an addition and why it's difficult at say, well, why don't we just expand 100 students at all the campuses? It's this tornado shelter thing for the building code that's killing us because the costs are just tremendous. Hang on just a second. The code says you only have to build it for 50 students, large enough the addition that you're doing. Well, that's ridiculous. We would not build a 50-student tornado shelter with 750 in the school. So we have to build it large enough to accommodate all the students. That square footage is very, very expensive. You know, it's almost twice what it costs just to build regular classrooms. So this is why another consideration beyond what we've talked about as numbers, it does get into the dollars discussion, saying, well, let's just try to make our expansions within what space we have and not do additions.
So
Yes,
you bring up the tornado shelter, why don't you do it in the two-phase system for the elementary schools where you do an addition to the library so it doesn't add student capacity, and then take the existing library and convert it into classroom size so that you're not actually making an addition or making it with additional capacity to get around the 2015 IFDC.
any library we build, you can put more than 50 kids in the number. So I would still have to make
It's an accessory use, and they have to have rooms in classrooms, is my understanding of how your occupant load works for elementary schools, no?
Very specifically, the way the code is worded is it's the occupant load of the space that you're adding on to. So if the occupant load by square footage can fit more than 49 kids in it, that triggers the requirement for the shelter, regardless if you're adding additional kids to the school or not. And so that becomes an interpretation issue by the AHJ, the Authority Having Jurisdiction, and they have to vet that out. And so they're, in talking to different AHJs around the area, we're getting different answers from people. So we have to plan for worst case scenarios. For example, Fort Worth has amended out that requirement altogether. And so additions on a campus aren't even triggering that because they can rid that out of the code. But other areas
We
like
can't say that.
Arlington, they're just adopting it as is. So that's just
So, as Paul says, we're taking a line, worst-case scenario, at this point, because we just don't know what the city of Little Elm will do, or the city of Hackberry, or, you know, the various municipalities that the school district covers. So, that's what we're dealing with, whether we like it or not. I mean, yeah. Other questions? Move on. Okay. Continuing on our potential projects, athletics. Number 6, a multi-purpose facility, and then existing high school athletic renovation. So what we're talking about here is a 2-story field house with an indoor field to be utilized by all athletic programs, band, dance, cheer, youth programs, etc., an indoor athletic facility. If we do this, we're vacating some, but not all, of the locker rooms out of the existing high school. Some will move out to the new, some stay just because of location to the fields. Baseball prefers to stay. But we do have the opportunity by pulling some of those out to renovate that space and convert it. So that's what we're talking about in that renovated, vacated athletics area. Sorry?
We're not replacing the turf with the athletic complex yet. They should in high school. Turf.
Gotcha.
Oh,
That one's not due yet.
okay. All right, so take off on the, you're talking about here, Bob, right here.
Yeah, that one's not due
So
yet.
we're gonna take that off.
When's that need to be replaced, Sandra?
Probably about 6 more years, 7 years.
So what looks like that line?
Okay, but to continue up here, tennis court renovations are included in that, additional bleachers, press box, shared restroom concession for baseball and softball, replace the practice fields.
So Sandra, in the prioritization, the replaced turf would just need to be moved up a bullet
To the
to that high school one and taken out of that, okay, okay.
Yeah, up here, okay.
Gotcha,
The turf at the high school, not at the athletic complex, right?
gotcha.
So is that replace practice field?
Oh, it is
Or is that
Yes,
different?
yeah, that's
The
still,
current practice field turf, yes.
Okay, so
Is
those
the
are.
first one usually.
right. So that at the athletic complex, we're looking at resurfacing the track, upgrading the shot put areas, scoreboard, component upgrades, and concession, adding the air conditioning to the concession stand. And who wouldn't want that?
You're gonna find out.
As Clay talked to you last time about, security technology, we're looking at security and fiber backbone upgrades at all the facilities. HVAC, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning to the main distribution rooms. That's where you have all your servers. Those rooms just need to be super cooled because of all the equipment in the room, and so this would accomplish that. A new location for the Network Operations Center, or NOC. Did you hear somebody talking about the NOC? That's a Network Operations Center. And then he talked about neighborhood Wi-Fi network, providing that. So we want you to consider that in that project as well. I believe that's it.